This is the theme of Setback, an interview with the Hitman. Victor's decisions select frames. As Michael sits in this restaurant, I do want to remind you of the next assignment that he has, which is to kill that reporter, right? Remember that? But we have to assume that if he's sitting in this restaurant, that he's contemplating his strategy, right? Because later he is going to kill he's not going to kill the woman, but he is going to go to her apartment and basically tell her to leave. And that's only because he sees a baby in the bassinet. And that's only after his dealings with Bethesda and getting involved with her, falling in love with her, falling in love with her, and she getting pregnant, and how that now informs his thinking about being a father and having a family. But he sits here in a restaurant that may be a popular hangout because Bethesda is now going to come into the narrative, and the three men who are going to attack Bethesda are also going to come into this narrative. So he's in a restaurant and sitting down, taking a drink. It's very quiet, peaceful, right? And now here comes chaos. So Bethesda comes through the door, and we're not going to ignore the purpose of doors, right? Because remember, this is a setup. We don't know that it's a setup until the end of the film, but Bethesda coming through this door is really a setup. She's setting up Victor to be found out and discovered that he's actually really alive, and that when he framed his death, that wasn't actually true. So coming into this door is making a decision about how she's going to set up the very person who killed her family, who killed her mother and father, and who contributed to her having to be basically sold and put to work. So you have to wonder then, as I noted in some frames earlier, how long has she been surveilling Victor? Because she had to know that he was in the restaurant or visited this restaurant often for her to come in and then look at him and then set him up. Because when Victor goes and tries to rescue Bethesda, he goes into the kitchen and fights the other men. Well, there's a camera that we don't see, and all those actions are actually on camera, and we're not going to see that they were on camera the whole time until we get to trafficking, and we get to Alexei watching the video. And it is actually Alexei who gets the video first, and then he sells it, or he gives it to trafficking as a way of, as some kind of incentive to get out of the mob business, because he also has a family. And we're going to see that later. But the decision here is much more strategic than we realize, because how is she able to get a copy of the camera feed? How is she able to get a copy? So she must know the owners. She must know. You almost have to wonder, is she an owner herself? How is she connected to this restaurant in order to have access like that? And we don't get that narrative history of sort of how she is connected to this restaurant, but we do get when the guys come in, the three guys come in to basically attack her. One of the guys says, "Why don't you stay this time? Stay and have a drink with us this time." And again, I didn't catch that earlier. I did not catch that earlier, but when I looked at the movie 2 or 3 times later, I realized, oh, she must know the people in this restaurant. She must have been here before. Um, she must know the people who are attacking her, or she knows their character, or she knows their routine. So she's just not coming into this restaurant innocently. She's coming with a whole sort of strategic vengeance in mind to sort of befriend Victor, make him fall in love with her, get her pregnant, and then shoot him so that he won't have a relationship with his own child, so that he won't have the family that he likely dreamed of. So, again, coming through this door, there's a lot, there's a space of time that we don't have access to. And that is due to the writer director sort of setting us back in our understanding of the narrative structure. It would be nice if we saw maybe a flashback of Bethesda having a conversation with Alexi or having a conversation with Traffic. She's not going to be able to do that because she's the clientele of big politicians and big big businessmen, or anyone with deep pockets. She's the clientele. She's the service. She's the product. She's the product. And it's interesting that when Victor aims to shoot her as a child, it's interesting that we wouldn't see her now had he shot her. She wouldn't have been able to take vengeance on Victor had he shot her as a child. But when she comes in the door, we do know her narrative history. We don't know it at this point that this is the same woman who was a child that Victor was about to shoot. But it's something that's a little obvious to us, that he's going to meet somebody and maybe that person is connected to his past or something like that. But that door being left open as she walks through it is an example of her narrative history that spans all the way back to her childhood. If we had a visual right now, we could see that child, and that child sort of taking steps in an evolutionary way to the person that we see today. And we don't get images of rape. We don't get images of someone hitting her. We see the scars on her back, but we don't get the images of that. So that coming through the door, that door here it represents a lot of decision making on the part of Bethesda that we don't have access to, which sort of sets us back. And her coming through the door is actually going to set Victor back because he's already vulnerable from the betrayal. And he's already vulnerable from maybe almost being killed by Kovacs trying to frame him as a cop. And then he's already vulnerable by using the language of outside. So he feels alone. He feels outside. He doesn't have the mentor that he had to shoot. For the first time, he's a child still. He's a child in a grown man's body, but he feels alone. He feels maybe even abandoned. So he's sitting there nursing that drink, thinking. We don't know what he's thinking about. He doesn't have a conversation. When she goes to sit down, he does kind of glance at her a little bit, but it could be just a glance at her for the sake of glancing at a customer coming through the restaurant. But it doesn't seem like he knows her. However, when she sits down, it's clear that there's some interest on her part in looking at him, but we don't see interest on his part in looking at her. The first time that we kind of see him with the woman is when he was going with the boss up the stairs when the elevator wasn't working, And that's really the first time we've seen him with a woman. So, and when he was with that woman, he let down his guard. Now, these were women who were put to service, right? To celebrate, but and to celebrate Victor putting that liquid nicotine into that cop's drink. But that was indicative of him sort of lowering his defenses when he was with a woman. So now then we're going to see him with Bethesda, and he's lowering his defenses. And this reminds me of the biblical story, Samson and Delilah. Samson has like extraordinary strength, and Delilah is trying to figure out what the secret is of his strength. And so he sort of plays around and mocks her and everything. And every time he tells her something about his strength, she brings in the Philistines to try to overtake him. But instead he overtakes him. Then she wears him down so much with her nagging and her pleading, to the point that he goes on ahead and tells her the secret of his strength, which is, if you cut my hair, I will lose all of my strength. And then it sounds actually believable. And so she sends in the Philistines. They shave his head, which is interesting that you don't know that your head is being shaved. I don't know if she put something in his drink or something like that, but it's interesting that you don't know your head is being shaved. So they shave his head, and then he wakes up thinking, she says, the Philistines are upon you. And he thinks, okay, I can operate in the same gift, talent, and skill, and I'm going to do exactly what I did before. And this time it doesn't work. They end up overtaking him. They gouge out his eyes. They strap him to some sort of large thing, and he basically has to toil for labor. Later he gets his vengeance, but it didn't necessarily have to go that way. He lowered his defenses when it came to a woman. And so there must be some kind of need in Victor, that he lowered his defenses with the woman that he wasn't in love with. They were about to celebrate. And now he's going to lower his defenses with the woman he is in love with, or he wants to have a family with. And so there's some kind of need in him that he hasn't tapped into. Of course, he's not going to reflect on, because he's always going to be on autopilot. Even if he's sitting here nursing a drink and thinking about the betrayal, and we have to assume that, he's still always going to be on autopilot, because he is a trained assassin. So there must be something in him that has a need. So she's playing her part. She's playing her part. She's playing like she is actually a customer coming in to eat at a restaurant. She's smiling, greeting the attendee, the bartender, and she's playing her part. And also notice the fact that she has a necklace that's actually going to bring them back together. So he doesn't look over at her. He continues to nurse that drink. He doesn't, I'm quite sure he's listening in, eavesdropping on that conversation. Remember, he's been trained as a hitman to eavesdrop. So even if he's sitting there thinking about this drink, he's also thinking about the conversation that the woman is having with the bartender. So we can assume that his ears are always open. He's always thinking, he's always wondering, he's always strategizing. So then she takes a look at him, and it's interesting that we don't know why she's looking at him like this, but we can understand that there's a reasoning behind the way she's looking at him. Because if it's just an honest exchange, honest engagement, you basically say hi. You might make small talk. Oh, I'm coming in from work, and I needed to get something to eat, and I don't feel like cooking or something. You would make small talk. She sits there and doesn't engage him, doesn't have a conversation, and she's watching him. Now, remember how Victor has been the type of person who has surveilled all of his assassination targets. He has watched them. So Victor is now an assassination target. Ooh, Ooh, that's really hard to think about. Victor is now an assassination target. So the tables are turning, and he doesn't even know it. That once he is framed for betrayal, that kind of drawing a line from one person to the next, like a clothesline, hanging who's going to betray him next, has become sort of like the new focus for the film. Remember in the courthouse, I mean, in the courtyard when he was with the kids and the bullies were attacking him, and the young boy calls out from the balcony, and remember all the clothes that were hanging on the clothesline in that area, in his in that slum area. Well, we're now hanging all the people who are going to betray him from Sergei all the way to the end of the film. So the narrative is now really shifting for us, because he knows his targets. He has searched out his targets. He has surveilled his targets. He has planned his strategy. He's eavesdropped. He's prepared. He's done all that was necessary to ensure that he can complete the task. But there's nothing in him that says, I need to do the same for Bethesda. That's why I say there must be a need in him. There's something in him that is crying out for something. I don't know what the something is, but it is always, for everyone, a cry out for connection. So whereas he has been surrounded in toxic environments, in the family environment where it was sort of insecure, and he felt like he needed to leave that family environment to go and become a mob enforcer to secure himself, so to speak, even though the mob enforcing environment is still insecure. We know that to be true because they try to kill him. But it's his journey from trying to leave insecure, toxic, chaotic environments to secure, stable, peaceful, less chaotic environments. And so then you have to wonder, does he see Bethesda as an opportunity for having a family, to close the gap in that connection? Because I believe he considers Sergei family. And so now that that has left a gaping hole in his heart and in his mind and in his thinking, the heart is searching for something to grab onto. The soul is searching for something to grab onto. You cannot live off shooting and killing people as a way to live the rest of your life. There's something in you that's always going to want to pull at something that is much better for you. And so this look that she is giving him says a lot. Without saying anything, this look that she is giving him, we know by the end of the film that he's a target for her, but he doesn't know that. And he's not eavesdropping enough to know it. He's not thinking about her enough to know it. So that lets you know that the men in this movie never really suspect the women to have any kind of strategy, that they would never ever think that the women would make them targets. But Bethesda is now looking at her target. And so this is still her looking at him. There's a lot that is going on with his face. We don't know what she's thinking right now, but the way that she is, spacing out her lips, and I'm not a body language expert, but the glare that she is giving him is something to remark about, meaning that it's like it's almost like she needs to watch him and stare at him long enough to take in who he is as an adult. And I wonder if she's watching him so long to look at the child in him. She knows who he is. she knows his name is Viktor. We don't know how she knows his name is Viktor, but she knows his name is Viktor. And she knows this is the person who shot her family, who killed her family. And she's going to reveal that at the end. She's not revealing it now, but we know that's her narrative history. But the choice of the writer-director to sort of hold her back or set her back, but basically hold her back from engaging in conversation with them is kind of strategic here, because you can't do too much too fast, because then Viktor might get suspicious and decide to leave, right? He just may decide to leave altogether way before the three men come. And so, because he's still very tender and vulnerable in his heart concerning the previous events, right? Concerning his own narrative history. He might have set fire to that apartment, trying to erase himself, but his mind, his neurology, his thinking about what transpired from the time he was a child all the way to who he is today is still in his thinking. He's replaying it like a tape in his mind. He's replaying the betrayal. He's replaying the issues with Franco. He's replaying the issues with trafficking. He's replaying the issues in his childhood. When he attempts to leave this restaurant, we're going to get a flashback of his memory to his childhood and when his father is beating his mom. He never lets it go. It's hard to let it go. And so just because you shoot somebody doesn't mean that you have shot the memory of your experiences out of your head. Just because you shoot the person who probably is the person who probably represents your father or anybody else or even your mother, they're still in your head, still replaying like a movie. It's as if you are using a remote control to continue to replay the exact same image over and over and over again. And so we could say the same thing of her too, that when she's looking at him, she's thinking about her childhood. She's thinking about sitting on the floor holding her dead mother. And she's thinking about seeing her father fall to the floor after Viktor killed him. And so that's a lot that could be going on in those eyes, could be going on in those cheekbones, could be going on in that mouth, the almost desire to want to say something, but you have to hold yourself back. And that takes a lot of patience. You are making someone an assassination target, and you have to walk it out with a lot of patience. You have to tolerate. She had to tolerate having sex with him. But remember, at the end, when she's talking to the interviewer, she said she learned the ways of men. So she knew how to turn off that part of her brain and that part of her mind to do what was necessary to gain the advantage. So there's a lot that is going on in her thinking, in her face. Viktor never turns to look at her. I'm quite sure he's thinking that she is looking at him, but he never turns to look at her. And I don't know why he's not. You know, I would think that any red-blooded man would sort of engage her, but he's not. That lets you know that he's stuck in his thinking about something. He's stuck in whatever he's thinking about in terms of his narrative history and the decisions he made. He's likely feeling his mortality. That there's a lot that we do in our 20s, and then we need to start getting serious in our 30s. And then by the time we get to our 40s, we are now feeling our mortality. We are realizing that, oh, we could die. That I can't make the types of decisions, risky decisions that I made when I was in my 20s, because I can actually die. We think we are invincible in our 20s. And we might start to get a clue in our 30s, or we should get a clue in our 30s. But in our 40s, we are really, it's a shocking revelation that, oh, we have mortality. Oh, I can die. So the people that he's been shooting, he's never thought about their mortality. He only thought about the assignment. He only thought about the task. And he only thought about the instruction from Sergei or from trafficking or from Franco. So it didn't really matter to him whether they had mortality. They were already dead from the get-go. Once he took out his gun, they were dead. But now sitting in his restaurant and thinking about the next assignment from that mob boss who says, I want you to kill this reporter. I'm quite sure he's thinking about that. I'm quite sure he's thinking about Sergey, of course, and I'm quite sure he's thinking about a lot of the events that have transpired up into him nursing this drink. So this is a sort of wider view of how they are basically not engaging each other. Nice restaurant, nice sort of setup. This part of the set, it looks believable. It might be an actual true restaurant, but again, they're not engaging each other. Even though as children, they know their child histories know each other. This is the same man who was a young child who held a gun to her family. And this is the same woman who as a young child looked into the barrel of a gun. And I don't know what she was hoping, but she looked at him, didn't say a word. So the same child who didn't say a word is the same woman you see here who is not saying a word. The same child who was holding the gun to her head and didn't say a word. This is the same man who is not saying a word to her now. And I just thought this was interesting as sort of like a wider view of how distant but close they really are. And again, if they got to talking and having a conversation right here in this restaurant, because you kind of spill all your guts when you're hurting, a lot would have been revealed. But when you think about how they engage each other, she never reveals who she is. She never reveals her narrative history, how there was this young boy who held her family at gunpoint. She never reveals that. So again, that takes strategy. That's a setback for Viktor because he's not getting all the information about who Bethesda really is. And it is a setback for herself that she's personally setting herself back from revealing who she truly is because she needs to pace this out in the same way that the writer-director needs to pace the development of Bethesda and her goals throughout the narrative. If we get that too soon, then the movie would end, right? So it's important that the writer-director is just as patient as the character that he is writing for. So the three men come in. You can tell one is in charge. The other men or basically his backup. Right before he goes and grabs Bethesda, the bartender comes up to him. And the guy with sort of like the jacket sort of takes his head and hits his head up against the counter. Then he falls out on the ground. So there's something about the bartender who doesn't like these three guys to the point that he basically had to address them. I can't remember if he addresses them in a sense of asking, what are you doing here or something like that. Regardless, this guy who is at the front of the game, he just looks like the type of person who would just start something just to start something, even if the bartender was nice, right? He's just going to start something because he has another agenda, and his agenda is always to create and perpetuate chaos. So Bethesda catches their eye. She is noticeably afraid, but in thinking about Bethesda and her sort of strategy to set up Viktor, I wonder if this is a true fear. I wonder if she truly knows these men, because when Viktor goes to save her, she only basically has a cut on her lip. And I'm thinking, if they're trying to attack her and rape her, why didn't they punch her in the face? And Why isn't she sort of crying from her eyes or something like that? She only has a cut. And it could be that they could have easily taken a knife and just cut her lip the way it looks when we see her face. But her face is not as misshapen as it should be. If these are rowdy, disrespectful, dishonorable, abusive type men, and usually these types of men will do all that they can to subdue you. It could have been that they had her in a in a hold enough to rape her or do whatever they needed to do to her. But it's interesting that her face is not as damaged when Victor finally fights them and then takes her out of the restaurant to put her in a cab. That is not as damaged as you think it might be, right? So she sees them. We are afraid for her because we are in this part of the movie. But when you get to the end of the film, you have to wonder if this was also part of the setup. So then we see the scars on her back. Victor also sees those scars. And, you know, scars have their own narrative history. I think I mentioned this earlier in this film analysis. So we don't know. There are lines on her back. And it's likely someone used a razor or used some kind of item to kind of make those scars. They're not necessarily from whips. Usually a whip would have maybe they might be circular, they may be longer lines, right? We do see a longer line in the middle of her back, so that might have been by a whip. But those two lines at the top of her shoulder are different types of lines, and we don't know what those lines are, but they tell a story. There is a narrative history behind them, and the writer director does not give us that visual. The only visual that he gives us is when Victor's father is beating his mother, and then Victor comes in and looks at her bloodied back. And so the woman that you see in Victor's mother could easily be the woman that you see here in Bethesda. So the main guy is, you know, sort of looking at Victor, almost challenging him to do something, to say something. You know, I always say about bullies are very effective in their strategies because they usually have a crew. But if he was by himself without his security, I wonder if he would have challenged Victor. It's interesting, though, the way he looks at Victor. You know, it's almost like it seems like he knows him. But he just might be the type of person who has contempt for people. Remember, Victor was bullied before. And he knows how to handle himself now. But Victor doesn't have his crew with him either. And so he has to play it cool because he can't so much as try to take on this crew in a sitting position. He would need to be in a more frame of mind for fighting. And we're going to see that later. Victor looks at him, doesn't say a word. It's, you know, it's a man thing. I'm not a man, so I don't know what they are saying to each other as men without saying anything to each other. But the guy doesn't engage Victor either. I mean, he sort of bams the bartender's head into the counter, but he doesn't pull back the table and the chair to engage Victor. So, as I noted, this must be just as much as a setup as Bethesda is setting up Victor. But it's interesting. Of course, when the man grabs Bethesda, you still don't see Victor making a decision to say, hey, stop, don't do that. It isn't until he begins to walk out of the restaurant, fights with one of the security men, and is about to cross through the door, and hears the cries of Bethesda, and flashes back to his childhood, that he then engages. It takes all of those different steps. So he understands the system, and he's not willing to fight the system over that woman. But it isn't until he's about to leave and flashes back to his own mother that he's now willing to fight the system. Remember, Victor has used the preposition, the preposition outside. So he considers himself outside. So when he tries to go through the door to leave and makes a decision to return, he is giving him he's giving himself the permission to fight the very system that he actually supports and enforces through being a hitman, through being a mob enforcer. This guy represents the system, represents the criminal element. So he's going to now fight him, when in reality, that's what mob enforcement is. Not only just assassination, but enforcing the clientele and forcing any politician or businessman. Victor is now going to fight the very system that he chose to join, because in fighting a guy and trying to rescue Bethesda, it is fighting the mob system. So Bethesda attempts to leave. The guy looks at her. The other security guard, the security guy, is looking at Victor. Victor doesn't see Bethesda getting up to leave. They're all watching each other, and it's likely a man thing again. But Bethesda getting up to leave, to me, could be a signal to the guy to do something. Again, when we see this part of the movie, we are very afraid for her. Now I am a woman, and I would, if I saw these men come in, I would do all that I can to try to hurry up and leave, because without them saying a word, a lot of times women who are vulnerable know what these types of men are up to. And we need to hurry up and get to a safe place, or get to a person who we think can protect us. It's interesting, though, that she doesn't get up and walk towards Victor and ask him for protection. That's interesting, because usually women in certain environments will sort of try to appeal to another man. Oh, I feel afraid, or something like that. It's not always common, but it's common enough that if we are in a restaurant and it's just us, and then the restaurant is full of other men, and we can sense in one man that he's a nice person, a person that we feel could protect us, we tend to move towards that person. We may not move very close to him, but we'll move in the vicinity so he can see us. And we may engage in conversation to pretend that we know that person, so that the people who are coming in to attack someone don't suspect anything, that, oh, we're just friends anyway, right? And so we're hoping to send that kind of signal to that would-be attacker: please don't attack me, I'm with somebody. But he's going to grab her. So he grabs her, looks at Victor, almost challenging him to do something about it. Victor doesn't do anything about it, and they're going to take her to the back. Victor looks at him, doesn't say a word, doesn't engage him, watches him, maybe on some level says, this doesn't have anything to do with me, do whatever you're going to do, I got my own business to take care of. And so we see that the man has put his hands over Bethesda's mouth, but the Bethesda that we see here could also still be acting, because you can't be, to me, on some level, you can't be a person who is afraid of these people and also be a person who is trying to take vengeance on your assassination target. Now, sometimes if you've been triggered from childhood because you were raped or molested or attacked as a child, something in the way he's holding her could still be a triggering event. That even in her mind to set up Viktor as an assassination target, that the way he's holding her could still trigger her and trigger the child who was first raped by somebody, right? That they probably took her from the back, or they probably put their hands on her mouth to shut her up, to shut up the screaming. So it can still be a triggering event for even for a person who's trying to take vengeance on their assassination target. So Viktor, they walk to the back. Viktor clenches his jaw, um, and he's sort of in limbo, in emotional, psychological limbo. He turns his head. It bothers him, but he doesn't get up to say, "Let me go take care of this now." He does a lot of he really does a little bit of waiting, and then he resigns himself to go on ahead and leave out of the restaurant. So this is a wider view of him hearing the screams of the woman, hearing the commotion in the background. I mean, in the kitchen. Of course, he still doesn't do anything. He doesn't even nurse his drink anymore. He hears is very distinct, but he decides to get up and walk out. And the security guard approaches him and basically tells him that he can't leave. So here is the security guard telling him that he can't leave. And then Viktor says, "Yes, I basically can," and he fights the guy. And then this is where Viktor is at the door. He's entering the door. He's exiting a place, but he's basically entering the door, and he's going to stay within this doorway for a good minute, thinking. He hears the cries of the woman, right? And remember, don't forget, if the cries of the woman are still just as strategic, because we find out that she is setting him up. So he's thinking, wondering, should he go and handle this? Because remember, he has positioned himself as an outsider now. And so whatever decisions that he can make whatever decision he makes. He's still standing in the doorway, holding the door, thinking, wondering if he should go back. That hand on the glass of the door says a lot. That pause is like he said, I'm not willing to let this go. I got to do something about this. And maybe this speaks to his childhood when he first decided to become a mob enforcer, that I don't want to become my father. I don't want to become my background. I don't want to become my narrative history. I got to do something about it. It wasn't the right choice, but it was a choice that he felt like he needed to make at that time. So this holding the door while he's still a little bit inside and out, is like straddling the fence. What should he do? What decision should he make? Does this belong to me as a problem to solve? Because remember, he was given assignments to solve. He was giving tasks. They were assassination assignments, but Sergei gave him the assignment or assigned him to do something, right? Now he has to take the responsibility and assign himself. He has one last assignment that he has to do for that second mob boss, which is kill that reporter. But now that he's on the outside, he's now having to assign himself. So this holding the glass in the door and holding the door and standing inside and outside of it is this sort of contemplative thinking about what role he's now going to serve. What is he now going to do? Is he going to continue to find another mob boss and be a contract killer, or is he going to now be his own boss and making a decision to go back in and solve a problem? Assigning himself to solve a problem is the steps leading to him becoming his own boss. And he's still in his door, you know. His hand is still slightly on the glass of the door, but his eyes are closed. The screams are getting louder, and now he's going to flash back into his narrative history, his childhood. So this is the father who has a belt, who is not beating the child, he's beating his wife with so much force. And this is reminiscent of him when he was in the bed, when Victor was in the bed, and then he turned himself. And this happens, I feel like this happens when Victor's father felt challenged in his authority, right? When Sergey comes and asks him to pay the money that he owes, and punches him in the stomach, we hear these cries. When Victor refuses to acknowledge his father while standing in the kitchen, we hear these cries. So I think that he beats the wife, beats his mother, simply because there are challenges to his manhood. And there's nothing like feeling like a man in targeting a victim and beating a victim and feeling the full expression of the chaos that is on the inside of you and creating chaos on the outside of you, right? That, again, what was his door? I'm quite sure that he saw his father beat his mother, and that became a door for him to enter, because there was nothing on the inside of him that says, I don't like the fact that my father beat my mother, and I want to be sure that I don't become that person. Even Victor choosing to become a mob enforcer is his way of saying, I don't want to be like my father, so I'm going to do whatever I can to do better, because we don't see the father working anywhere, not even trying to become a mob enforcer. So there's nothing in this father who is beating his wife. I don't want to become what I saw growing up. Whereas with Victor, he's saying, I don't want to become what I saw growing up. So remember, Victor was in the bed with that cut to his head, and he's hearing his father beat his mother. And so that was the extent of the flashback that he remembers, and that's what pulls him back into the restaurant. That's what causes him that flashback of his father beating his mother, and hearing that while he turned himself around in the bed to get some kind of comfort for himself from those cries, is what actually pulls him back in. And he turns around and he makes a decision to re-enter this door, to now be a true outsider, that he's now going to fight the very system that he has supported. So he walks. Remember, we get the back of him. So we got the back of him when he was running in the jogging uniform. We got the back of him when he was a child and deciding to become a mob enforcer. We get the back of him in different areas of the film, and now we get the back of him making a decision as an outsider to go in and rescue the cries of a woman, or to rescue the woman who is being attacked by these men. So that means he disagrees with some elements of the system that he enforces, that he hasn't had any really direct influence with the clientele, the women who are put to work. But this time he now has direct experience with it, and so now he's going to solve the problem. So then he comes into the kitchen. It's very light considering where he just left, but it's a full service kitchen. And it is here where he is saying enough. enough. This is another word from an outsider now who is saying this is enough. Whereas when he was enforcing the system, killing people, he never said assassinating somebody was enough. He's now saying that it is enough when it is in relation to this woman being attacked. He never even said it was enough. You know, it's interesting when he finds that child in the trunk of the car that Franco killed. You don't hear Victor saying enough. When Franco messes up the drug exchange, you don't hear him saying enough. You don't, when Sergey comes to kill Victor, you don't hear Victor saying enough. You don't, when Victor surveils to find out Rafa and present him to the second mob boss, you don't hear him saying enough. And when he eventually has to kill Kovacs, you don't hear him saying enough. But now that he's switching from outside, the word outside, to enough, we're going to see his decision making, because he's going to let Alexei go, the same one who sold him out. And actually he likely got the information from Bethesda, right? The film, the film video. And then he's going to let go of the reporter. And those are examples of his enough, which are fueled now by this concept of being an outsider. I want to stay with this idea, this concept of looking at Victor now framing himself as an outsider, and that when he comes into the kitchen to resolve this issue with Bethesda being attacked, that he uses the word enough. And in both instances, I feel like that Victor is becoming somewhat an interventionist, right? That when I say that he frames himself as an outsider and that he's saying that's enough to the men, and I'm linking it to the idea that he's now going to fight against the system. When you look at this frame here, he's fighting against the system. He's going against the system, but he's also intervening on behalf of Bethesda before he even understands who Bethesda is, right? Bethesda, who she actually is. And to intervene, I looked it up, and the meaning for intervene is to come between, to prevent or alter a result or course or of event. Again, intervene, to come between, to prevent or alter a result or course of events. And so he's becoming this interventionist that, had he lived beyond Bethesda's shot to his chest, he might have been sort of like the moral imperative guy who fights against the system. The people that he is sent to kill, like the cop who he pours liquid nicotine in his coffee, a cop who is unwilling to be bought, or the reporter who is reporting on the second boss, mob boss. He might have eventually become those types of people fighting against the system. This is the first step, because remember, Bethesda is a client of the system. She's a product. Why would you fight against a product when you are a mob enforcer for the whole mob, right? But this fight sequence that you're going to see is that step by step towards a more secure attachment, that something on the inside of him is reaching towards something else on the inside of somebody else. It is a step by step towards fully leaving what he has left, that narrative history. Because remember, to the second mob boss, he said he's not going to basically be able to join because he can't risk it. And so usually he usually when he joined something, he didn't really think about it as that long. He just joined it. At any time Sergey gave him a task, he performed it. But you don't even see him performing immediately the task that the mob boss tells him to do in killing the reporter. Instead, he goes to this restaurant and sits down, and that's where he meets Bethesda. Because in any other regard, he would have handled that, but he doesn't handle it until he's basically secured his relationship with Bethesda. So I look at him as an interventionist, that he's beginning to fight the system that he chose to join and enforce in a criminal, violent way. He's now intervening on behalf of this woman that he doesn't know. Just because he heard her screams doesn't mean that she was actually screaming. He didn't see her get hurt, right? In the same way that he has been exposed to his mother being hurt, he just heard the screams. And so then he equated the screams that he heard from Bethesda in the kitchen to the screams of his mother that he has always grown up with. But that's not really understanding the problem. That's not really trying to understand how to solve a problem. That's intervening before you have an opportunity to understand. So this intervention, this way of him coming between to prevent or alter a result or course of events is going to have deadly consequences for him, because he's intervening on behalf of a person who is actually setting him up. And that's something that that never even crosses his mind. The whole time that he was with her for 6 months, leading to his own assassination, it never occurred to him that she would be setting him up. So this idea of outsider, him framing himself as an outsider and then coming in and saying to the men enough, is all sort of coming together as a way for him to become the thing that I believe he really wanted to be. I think in some ways he wanted to solve his family's problems, but he wasn't willing to take on the debt of his father to solve those problems, but he was willing to save himself in becoming a mob enforcer. I think the last thing I might want to say about this in terms of intervention, remember that Victor never intervenes on behalf of his parents. And he really didn't have the power as a child to intervene. But like I said, when you see your parent being attacked, there is something on the inside of you that should push you towards jumping on the person, kicking the person, yelling, "Don't hurt my mom," yelling, "Don't hurt my dad," crying or something like that. And we don't see that in Victor. But he's willing to come back and intervene for this particular person. And maybe on some level, there might be some guilt that he didn't intervene on his mother's behalf with his father, or on his father's behalf with Sergey. Maybe there's that notion of feeling powerless as a child, but feeling now powerful and coming to fight these men. Regardless, that's why it's so important that you sort of address problems before they become greater problems, because what he didn't do or what he couldn't do when he was younger, he's now trying to do, but is actually going to lead to him being set up and killed. So we have this fight sequence, and I remember hearing in a video, watching a video interview, and that this scene that is choreographed, the fight person that he is fighting with is the actual fight choreographer. Now, I didn't necessarily like this scene. I thought Victor coming in to try to save Bethesda or solve some problem that he felt was necessary to resolve was fine. But I have a problem with Victor falling like this when he's supposed to be a skilled assassin. How can these sort of these guys come in who don't even look like they have skill to fight, come in and sort of knock him down? And this may be indicative of the idea that Victor just no longer wants to participate in these types of antics, because he seems to come off as much more skilled than he really is. But he may not have fighting skill as well. You know, just because you shoot a gun doesn't necessarily mean you have fighting skill. Now, he does pretty well in this fight sequence. He manages to handle the guy very well, but I thought this sort of stumbling onto the table was kind of, especially the way the guy fights him, it just seems like it didn't warrant it, right? He's supposed to be much stronger as an assassin than to be a person who just merely falls onto a table. And it seems like he trips himself, or I don't know, he sort of like trips and falls or something like that. It doesn't seem like the guy hits him hard enough for him to fall back. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because it goes against our understanding of what an assassin should look like, what an assassin should be like. He comes in with the advantage, really. The men don't really expect him to come in. At least we don't know that at this time and at this point in the movie. The men didn't expect him to come in. And so he comes in with the advantage, so he should be really taking them down a lot quicker. So I just thought that was interesting, this fight choreography, that Victor stumbling onto this table sends out many warning signals to the viewer that does he really want to do this? Because does he really want to stay an assassin? This stumbling is symbolic of him not only maybe stumbling into this world, but trying to stumble out of it at the same time. And so I thought this was kind of like an interesting fight sequence. So we have Victor still in this fight choreography. And so he has gained the advantage. So it's like a system coming after him stumbling and then regaining his power position or regaining his advantage. And so this is where I felt like when I was screenshotting the frames, this is where I felt like Victor most conveys his attitude towards fighting against the system for which he chose and for which he has been enforcing for so many years. Now, this hit to the back or hit to the side is symbolic of him now hitting the system from the side or slightly in the back, right? And that it is him with a vengeance, ironically. And I'm not sure that he sets a goal, a task to be vengeful. For all intents and purposes, he is coming in to save Bethesda. But you have to think about the narrative history of him being betrayed as well, and him pulling that energy, pulling from that state of mind, pulling from that energy to hit this person in the back. He doesn't know this person enough to have this kind of energy against him. And this could be just male energy fighting male energy as well. But this is where I thought this was very interesting, that this image here best conveys for me Victor's desire to now fully fight against the system for which he's been enforcing for so many years. He manages to get this guy by the neck. And that's also symbolic of choking out the system, right? Taking it from behind. Remember the guy in the restroom where he takes the guy from behind, gets behind the very system that he's now trying to overtake. And so now every person that he's going to fight as he continues to frame himself as an outsider, is going to be one. Um, the purpose will be to sort of choke the system, take it from the side, take it from the back, um, take it from the neck, right? And interestingly enough, as I noted, that it would have been sort of kind of wonderful to see if he had become a mob boss himself. But Bethesda sets us back as the viewing audience when she shoots him. She takes away a lot of his potential at becoming a mob boss. I'm not saying that he might that he wanted to stay with the mob, but things look a lot differently when you are the boss, when you are on the other side of the desk. And so there's a schooling that you get when you are a student, a mentee, a pupil. And then there is a schooling that you give when you are the mentor, the teacher, right? The trainer, the instructor, the boss. And so this to me represents that sort of symbolic way of now taking down the system from the neck. So then he manages to finish the fight, and then he looks at the woman on the ground, who's on the floor, and he looks at her, and I don't know if he has any sympathy. He just might be looking at her. So then he eventually walks towards Bethesda. He gathers her up. He doesn't say much or anything like that other than saying that we have to go, right? There's a sense of urgency because he doesn't know if anyone is going to come in. And so I wonder then, if he feels like he has to go, how familiar is he with that restaurant? Who owns that restaurant, who might be coming after them? And so we've never seen him surveil that restaurant, nor have we seen her. But there's a sense of urgency in him that basically says it's time to go. We got to get out of here. And this is where I say that Bethesda doesn't have many injuries, especially on her face or even around her neck. If someone is coming to attack you and rape you, usually you would have many more injuries than this mere cut on your lip. The man didn't punch her in the eye. The man didn't take her by the neck. He didn't pull out her hair or something like that. And that's why I say that when we find out that she was behind this whole thing, the whole thing in terms of setting Viktor up and getting the film footage and basically giving it to Alexei, who then gives it to Trafficant, the boss who basically had Sergei kill Viktor or attempt to kill him, that I feel like even the attack from the men was a setup. I feel like that was a setup as well, because any person who has been a victim of domestic violence, of any type of violence, usually even if it's the second, third, fourth, fifth, 15th time that you are being attacked, the person always gives you a fresh new injuries, a fresh hit, a fresh slap to the face, or a fresh knock to the ground or something like that. They always give you new injuries. And for her to not have injuries near her eye, or not even see the handprint from a slap from one of the guys, right, is interesting to me. This little thing on the lip, she could have punched her own self for that. She could have thrown herself up against the wall for that. So that's why I wonder about this sort of look that she gives. And of course, the writer-director is purposely not giving her fresh injuries. He may not have thought of it, or he just may be purposely not giving it to her. But it's interesting, too, that even Viktor is just not considering it as well. So he takes her outside. She's still in her actress role, in a sense. She's still acting out this part of being the helpless victim attacked person who needs help and guidance from Victor. And she closes her eyes, and it really does seem like she needs this type of help. So he helps her into the car, into the cab, still with her eyes closed. She looks up at him, and she was wondering why he wouldn't get into the car with her. And I think he basically says, "I'm going a different way," or something like that. But she eventually takes out a piece of paper, gives him a piece of paper, which I think is about to happen now. So they still have a bit of a conversation, and then she tears off a sheet of paper. And I don't remember her even writing on that paper, but she tears out a sheet of paper and gives it to him. Once she closes the door and the car pulls off, he throws the paper down to the ground. And then I think she purposely drops her necklace, because it's the same necklace that she looks for in the kitchen and picks up. And then she throws a sheet of paper. She gives him a sheet of paper, but he throws it. And then she drops the necklace. And that's purposeful, because she knows that he's going to now contact her, right? Just giving him a sheet of paper, he could make the choice, oh, I could contact her or I may not contact her. But now, knowing that there's a necklace on the ground and it looks like a very treasured necklace, she knows beyond a shadow of a doubt he's going to contact her now. So he's sitting in his loft area or apartment thinking about the necklace. Nothing familiar comes to mind about it. When he's aiming to shoot Bethesda with her sister, one of the sisters, and I think it's Bethesda, grabs at the mother, who is now shot and dead, and there's a chain, or pulls at a chain or something like that, and I feel like it's probably this necklace here. So now he's on the phone and he's contacting her, and he says, "I got something of yours." And that's how it starts officially, even though it started much earlier when Bethesda set to task to set him up and assassinate him. So they eventually get together, they meet, have dinner, and he's talking about how this is not easy for him. He's never done this before. Bad idea, the worst. But she's basically acting out her role. And see, what this tells me, that Victor has never done this before, that Victor has skipped a lot of steps in his personal development. Because once he decided to become a mob enforcer as a child, there was really no time to develop like relationships with women. So that is like his personal setback as well, his emotional, psychological, but definitely relationship engagement setback. Because if he had had the practice of dating while he was an assassin, but he had the practice of dating or seeing someone, he would have learned about women. Remember, it is Bethesda who says she learned the ways of men. But Victor was only taught the ways of your enemy with Sergei. He never really learned the ways of men, because if he did, he would have learned that betrayal is always possible. He learned the ways of his enemy. He learned the ways of his targets, not necessarily men. And he's never learned the ways of women if he says he's never done this before. And so, again, if he had had any exposure to just the ways of women and how the ways of women reveal themselves, he might have been able to detect a little bit in Bethesda. But Bethesda is a really good actress in terms of the character that she's playing. She's a character in terms of Bethesda, her name and her narrative history, but she's also Bethesda trying to play a role with Victor. So she's operating with two personalities. She's operating in dual roles. She has to make sure that she keeps both of them straight. The one that he doesn't know about and the one that she's trying to show him who she is. And so there's a little bit of a kind of conflict in between them. You know, he's sort of resistant to this idea, and she's still kind of pulling at him, but not so much. You know, she's keeping her cool. But it's kind of like this still sort of engaging dialogue about how this is not easy for him and how he's never done this before. And then they are having a conversation. That face says a lot about that face, you know, because we know that she's the one who has set him up. It's so, that face is so inviting, engaging, but it's scary too. It almost reminds you of a snake. That she is keeping a very tight lip about herself, so much to the point that we have to remember who she is. Now, we don't know who she is at this point in the film. We don't know that she's setting him up. And so we may be more intrigued by her eyes, by her hair, by her lips, by her face overall. But once we get to the end of the movie and we rewatch this and come to this scene, it's scary. It sort of sends shivers up the spine because we were sitting at the table with the snake and didn't even know it, right? And that's how assassins do. You know, they tend to snake their way into the lives of their targets, right, to figure out how they're going to take them out, and then they snake their way out. And that's essentially what she's doing here. She's putting on the face that is necessary to garner any kind of emotion from Viktor, continue to get him off guard, or sort of encourage him to let down his guard. And remember, it reminds me of Samson and Delilah, to the point that when she strikes, and it is very shocking at the end of the movie, when she strikes, he just never sees it coming. And so they get into a kiss, which is kind of passionate for them. And it says a lot about her being able to kiss him. And, you know, she doesn't go through the same conflict that he goes through in the movie. When he finds out that she's pregnant, and he's trying to decide if he wants to stay in a relationship. Even prior to that, he's conflicted, but she's not conflicted at all. She makes him fall in love with her, but she holds herself back from falling in love with him. And so they're in bed together again. There's that lighter environment, sort of that peaceful environment. He looks at her lovingly, and he looks at her back. And these are frames from the beginning of the movie. And again, he doesn't know that he has contributed to many of the scars on her back, if not directly, but definitely indirectly, considering that he is, or he was, the mob enforcer. And so she's lying in the bed, sleep. And it's interesting. I don't know how she can sleep with herself, knowing that she is setting this man up. I don't know how she can make love to him. I don't know how she can engage in a relationship with him. But she assigned it to herself. This is her assignment. And part of the assignment is continuing to learn about him and knowing his ways that she can come in from the back, from the side, in the same way that Viktor comes in from the back, from the side, from the neck. She's doing the same thing. You know, developing a relationship with him, letting him fall in love with her. You see on the frame here, this is 6 months later, and this is her assignment. he is her assassination target, and he is her assignment. And so any way that she can come in after him, and I don't know how she thought she was going to complete this task, but you always make adjustments when necessary, in the same way that Victor didn't think he was going to have to rescue Bethesda while he was sitting in a restaurant. He had to make an adjustment. And so he's conflicted. He's looking at her, sitting and observing her. She's asleep. And he's not tossing and turning in the bed, but he is tossing and turning in his mind and possibly in his heart. And so, again, he's very conflicted about what he should do going forward. And Victor is looking at the two glasses. One is empty and the other is not. And I want to talk a little bit about her patience for a minute, because when she senses that Victor is pulling away, she says to him, "You don't love me." And she also says, "I don't think you know how to love." And then he turns around and says, "I don't want you to go." And then she basically says, "Give me a reason to stay." And with that dialogue, I think it's very interesting that Victor is pulled in emotionally into one of these types of conversations that women have when they are trying to nag a man to love them. And maybe nag is too strong of a word, but I've at my age now, in my 40s, I'm 46. When you sense today a person who is not interested in loving you or wanting to stay with you, I think you should let that person go, because I feel like if the person really wanted to be with you, they would make the effort. You wouldn't have to pull at them to be with you. But remember, this is all an act. And so she knows the ways of men, and she knows how to sort of put on the fake waterworks, right, in order to get him to change his mind. It's something that nothing really prompts him to think. He looks at the two glasses, of course, and we get to see the two glasses. But immediately, a woman would understand that one of those glasses that is half full should tell you that either she's just not a drinker, or there is something else that is going on with her. But I thought an image of those two glasses was interesting to take to use as a screenshot, because it automatically calls attention to women that she may be pregnant. And so they are sitting at the table. And this is where she's saying that he doesn't know how to love. You don't love me. And he's saying, "I don't want you to go. Give me a reason to stay." And, that kind of middle part of the relationship where it's about to turn into something else long term. And I don't know where this is. We get an indication that 6 months later, but I don't know if this is before the 6 months or after the 6 months, but we just have to assume that it's after the 6 months. So they engage each other. He looks at her lovingly. And then this is where he sees the pregnancy test. Of course, he's going to be shocked that she's pregnant. So even before she became pregnant, he was already conflicted about his relationship with her, or him engaging in a relationship, especially as an assassin. But the pregnancy test is what now sends him into an even greater crisis mode, right? And so then he responds. He is conflicted. Is actually a bothersome idea, because It's a lot that you have planned your life to be one thing, and then it shifts. And it's voluntarily, in a sense that you know what it takes to produce a baby, but it's involuntarily because you didn't plan to be pregnant. You didn't plan to be a father. And he doesn't know what being a father is, because he really didn't have a true father figure. I mean, a true father in his real father. He only had a father figure who then turned around and betrayed him and tried to kill him. So there's so much that is going on in him standing in this shower and thinking about his narrative history and whether or not he is capable or even ready to be a father to a child, let alone be a relationship partner to a woman. And so we see him continually conflicted by this idea. And then this is where he does what he does. He goes and finds the gun and points it to her head. She never wakes up. She never wakes up. And I wonder, every time she's sleeping in this bed, I wonder if she's really awake. I really do wonder that. But she never wakes up, and he aims the gun at her head. Now remember, he's not going to be able to shoot her. There's too much love now on his part, and too much of relationship investment on his part to shoot her. Whereas in the beginning, when she was a child and he was pulling back the trigger, he couldn't shoot her because Sergey came in and stopped him. And we wouldn't be having this conversation, having this discussion, or we wouldn't see him shooting his gun had he shot her or had Sergey not stopped him. So we almost have to blame Sergey for stopping a process, because now he's going to reap the consequences of that decision, or that involuntary decision to not be able to shoot her or kill her. And so, the interesting thing that he could go and find a gun to shoot her is there was no resistance on his part. Just because he's not going to shoot her doesn't mean that we can say, oh, well, he resists. He resists the temptation. I think actually the temptation would have been not to take the gun out in the first place. If there was nothing on the inside of him that basically said, I don't want to do that. Maybe I need to talk to her. Maybe I need to break up with her or something like that. But I don't want to sort of equate her in the same way as the other assassination targets I have killed. And when he pulls out a gun to shoot, to aim it to her head, he's basically equating her. And the irony is thick, not even realizing that she is actually one of them. But he's equating her to all of the other people that he has set as assassination targets and actually killed. And so the gun that he's pulled out says a lot. It says a lot that he didn't even risk the temptation of pulling it out in the first place. And maybe he's on autopilot, maybe he's on auto drive or something like that. But the time he has spent with her, the fact that he has this child on the way, should have been something that he said, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pull a gun out on her. And she's sleeping quietly. And he goes somewhere and he thinks about the situation, right? He goes and cries, and he can't leave this situation. Remember, when he was leaving his parents' house and going down there to Sergey, he made a choice to leave. This situation, he feels almost powerless. He can't leave this situation. And it has gone way beyond conflicted or feeling conflicted. He has now resolved in himself that this is going to be my life, because he can't kill her, right? And he hasn't hugged her yet until he comes back from attempting to kill the journalist. But he's now resigned to the idea that there's no turning back, right? She's a woman. I love this woman. She's pregnant. We're going to have a child together. And the thought of me becoming a father is scary, especially when my hands have been filled with bloodshed, has caused bloodshed, and now I'm going to hold a baby, right? And that's a lot that's going on in his head that we have to assume, because he doesn't talk out the dialogue. We are kind of set back in this narrative because the writer director doesn't allow him to speak during this sequence. He's not speaking during this sequence, so we can't get any insight into what he's really thinking. So we just have to assume, and assumptions are not always good. It will be better for him to speak. However, the visual images of him being conflicted and scared and wondering if he will be the right person, etc., whatever, are still sufficient. So he's standing and looking at her as she sleeps, because he's about to leave and go out and meet the journalist. And so we get this image of the journalist. She has a baby. There's sort of like a baby bed and everything. She was holding the baby. And so she's here holding the baby, right? And she is the reporter that the second mob boss wants Viktor to kill. And he said he doesn't need it to be accidental. He just wants to send a message. So she's looking at the computer. It's nighttime, of course, and she's researching her target. Her target is that second mob boss, right? And in some ways, she's trying to assassinate his reputation. Okay, and remember, the interviewer has a reputation that's kind of disgraced, and he's using Viktor as an interviewing tool to sort of regain his reputation. And so here's the guy who is that second mob boss that she is going to write about. And Viktor is holding a gun to her head. He's looking at the screen. And it is here where he is telling her to leave tonight. Don't come back. She's dead. She's essentially dead. So this is where Viktor has decided, from the mindset of an outsider now, that he's not going to kill this woman. So the assignment that the second boss gave him to do, he's going to abandon that assignment. He's not going to do it. And maybe on some level, he's sort of helping the woman get out of town in the same way that Sergei initially helped him when he was a child after shooting Bethesda's parents, right? Either way, his narrative has shifted so much to the point that he is now letting people go. That whoever was an assassination target from the beginning of his thinking, that person is no longer that, and so he's telling her that she has to leave tonight. And she's telling her, and what really moves him is the fact that he sees the baby, or he knows the baby is there in the crib. So then once he tells the journalist to leave tonight, don't come back, and that she's essentially dead, she leaves. And then he comes home and he puts the gun in the drawer, right? And then he feels the baby belly, her belly, Bethesda's baby. So when he's putting the gun in the drawer, this gun has been in the drawer the whole time. And that's why I said I wonder why Bethesda never got the gun out to shoot him then. Because whether he is afraid, or whether he is shocked in this apartment, or whether he is shocked in that other apartment with the interviewer, it doesn't matter. He's shocked. And so all that time that she had to take him out, she could have taken him out. So, of course, this has a lot to do with the writer-director plotting this out, plotting out his setback, because in meeting Bethesda, it really is a setback for him. But it has a lot to do with how the writer-director is plotting it out. It has a lot to do with how even Bethesda is plotting out her assassination target, right? She is no different than what she is doing to Victor, the same thing he has done to other assassination targets. Uh, uh, plan out his own patience, plan out his own tolerance, plan out his own strategies, right? So putting the gun in the drawer, however, I feel like it is Victor's decision to now kind of put this whole ordeal to bed, maybe. He's never going to let go of a gun, as anybody would attest. But this may be his way of kind of letting go of this whole idea of mob enforcing, right? Closing the book on it. The same book that you see Trafficking close when he looks at the pictures and then he puts the pictures, the photographs into the book, and then he closes the book. We don't know for certain if he's going to do that, but the fact that he let somebody go, that person was supposed to be an assassination target, informs us or suggests and or implies that he's ready to let this go. So he lays in the bed with her, lies down on the bed with her, kisses her from the back, and then puts his hand on the belly. And so now he is actually invested in this idea of becoming a father, right? This is his unborn child. This is the woman that he loves. And so this is going to be his life. And so now it's time to let go of anything that might get in the way of that. All right, like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more discussions. You can visit my YouTube channel for further film analysis. It's Favorites Film Analysis as the title of the channel. You can always send me an email and ask me a question, reginayfavorites@yahoo.com. My Overcoming Setback, 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction book will become available around October 2021. I'm still doing some editing. The book does not focus on film analyses, but I use the content that I created for the book to support my my perceptions of setback used as a theme in select films. So when the book becomes available, I will send out a notification, video, audio. Thank you very much for visiting the channel.